This is Kaitlyns with Moral Revolution. So happy to be here today with those of you who are hopping on. Today's live and couch conversation with Moral Revolution is specifically for parents. We will be talking about no shame in your parenting game. That is the theme of the topic today. It's actually just going to be a quick 15 to 20 minute conversation where I'm just going to share actually pretty vulnerably and honestly on one of the biggest reasons that psychologists have found, counselors who have people in their office all the time, of what stops parents from talking to their kids about sex. And one of the biggest reasons is shame. So here's the deal. As parents, we have been given this huge gift and joy of raising children, and we get excited telling them about things, right? Like I love getting to tell my kids about things that are, in this world and the things that we live with and things about God. And I love telling them and watching their eyes light up, like with delight about like, oh my gosh, I never knew that. And like excitement of being able to let them in on how the world works and how our family works and how God works. Like it's so fun to teach our kids about things. And then when we get to tell them even about dangerous things that are protection for them of like, hey, we don't do this, we don't do that because it protects us. Even that feels good because you're like, wow, this is my role as a parent, and I get to tell them that this will hurt them, to watch out for this, to look for that. But when it comes to sexuality, a lot of times we get stopped and stuck in our tracks of like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to talk about sex with my kids. I want to do it right. I'm so nervous I'm going to mess it up, or they're too young. So I'm just going to go over, I did some research of finding what are the top reasons why we as parents struggle with talking in our homes about sex and sexuality with our children. One of the top reasons is that as parents, we feel like, man, we weren't parented well in this. So from that can stem either like, we can have two totally different responses of like, nobody told me, I turned out okay, it's fine. We can also just be like, I don't know how to do it because nobody told me, I've never seen this done before. Or we can also go to the other spectrum of like, nobody told me, so I'm going to tell them everything. I'm going to be like perfect at this. And then this like pressure to perform and do it really well. But kind of assessing and taking a moment to think, wow, how did I first learn about sex as a child? And what do I want to do the same? And what do I want to do differently with how I communicate to my kids about sex? And then another one is just fear of destroying their innocence. A lot of times we're really nervous about like, oh, they don't need to know this yet, or they're too young. But I think that even that lie or that excuse that keeps us from talking to our kids is that we think of it only as this dirty thing, or we think of sex as the world has portrayed it. So then we think, oh, that destroys their innocence. But really, when you have the privilege to teach your kids about sex and sexuality, you're telling them about something God created. That's not ruining their innocence. That's just telling them about the way our body works and the way God's used our bodies to create. So there's so much joy, but it takes a lot of mental effort and work to kind of retrain our brains on how we think about this. So I will be the first to admit all of this, which I'll get into more. Let's just go through a couple more reasons and excuses why we as parents don't want to talk to our kids. We say, I'll just talk about it when they're older. Totally do that all the time, or think, this will happen when they're like 15 or something. I'll talk about it if they want to. Like if they ask questions, then I'll be ready then. It's like, no, you don't have to, they don't have to be like, have arrived and asked all these questions. But when something comes up, or maybe when they are like kind of exposed to something, whether it could be even just a TV commercial, is taking advantage and using every opportunity to just talk about, oh, that wasn't really good. Like we're not supposed to view bodies that way or see that, like using every opportunity to talk healthily about sex and sexuality. Another one is another excuse is believing like, oh, they'll teach them that at school, right? Like, and depending on what country you're tuning in from, because I see somebody's from the Netherlands, every country is different on sex education in schools. But I know for me here in America and in California, there's no way I can rely on what the school is going to teach our children about sex. Not to mention, I actually choose to opt out of a lot of it and will choose to opt out of a lot of it because as we do the research of what they're teaching in schools, it's not what we want our children to be learning. And so it's so important that we as parents are the first mention and we are the ones teaching and talking to them about it. And then another excuse is kids don't want to talk to parents about this. Like, oh, not you, mom, or not you, dad. Like, that's kind of just been a cultural lie of like, oh, this is so awful to talk to my parents about it. But it's like, no, we are the people. Like, and we even explain that to our kids when we start sharing them with them different things. We're like, hey, so now that you know this, isn't it cool to know? And they'll be like, yeah, that's so cool. Like, they feel cool that they know something. So what do kids normally do with that? They want to go tell all their friends on the playground and be like, listen to what I heard from my mom. But we always tell them, this is really special stuff. And it was special for me to be able to tell you about this. So we don't want you to tell your friends or your cousins, because it's important for them to get to have that conversation with their mommy and daddy and not just hear it from another friend or family member. So just really encapsulating those moments and showing them and leading by example that no, these conversations are amazing to have with our parents and as family. So another lie that is I don't have the same genitals, so I can't teach them. And I think this has been a very common cultural misconception too, is like, oh, the boys, like my husband will talk to them, or like, oh, the daughter, my wife will talk to her. Sorry, daughters. I'm so used to our life. We only have one daughter, but there doesn't need to be a split. Like, I have 3 sons and I talk to them about their bodies, their body parts, girls' body parts, sexuality, mommy's body parts. Like, we talk about all of it. And I know there's been this misconception of like, oh, I should just wait and let my husband do that. Like, that's his job. Like, tap in, tap out. Like, oh, that's all you. Have another, fun conversation later. But I just want to encourage any moms that are on watching, and give me a wave if you want. But for moms, it's so important that we don't just tap out and say like, oh, my husband can handle that because it scares me, is really what it is a lot of times deep down. Another reason we don't talk to our kids about sex is because it's too awkward. Again, something that we need to fight through and overcome. Hey to the moms, I love the waves. It's super awkward sometimes talking to a screen of yourself rather than in a room of people, but this is our new normal with social distancing. So even though I'm alone in a room and kicked my family out for a little bit, it's so funny to be just talking to myself. It's good to see you there. Another excuse or things, this is actually a really good reason that I think kind of holds us up a lot, is I don't know what to say. Like, I want to do it right. I don't want to mess it up. I don't know about you, but I am a queen of procrastination. It's definitely just part of my personality. It's something I have to work to overcome. And especially when it's like my perfectionism makes me procrastinate. So it's like, oh, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it. So I don't want to say anything yet. And I just wait, and I wait and wait and wait until it's too late. And I think that's what, as parents, with this conversation, we can tend to do a lot. We're like, our oldest actually just had his 10th birthday yesterday. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's 10. And it feels like it goes like that. And as parents, we're like, oh, I haven't done this yet, or I haven't done that yet. And so that's where I want to get into the message of today's topic, is there's no shame in your parenting game. So there's no shame for you who might be watching and thinking, man, I am too late. Like, I haven't talked to my kids about this yet. I have a teenager in the house. Or a lot of times shame comes when we find out our kids have been exposed. So shame of our kids have been exposed to pornography, or our kids had a conversation with a family member, or something happened to one of our kids and they were touched inappropriately. Like, there's so many different things that shame can come in. And what does shame do in those moments? It doesn't just say, oh, I made a mistake. It's like, you are a mistake. So shame doesn't just say like, oh, I failed. It's no, you are a failure. And so we start to believe, man, we're a failure as a parent, especially in this arena of sexuality, because we haven't shown up and done it well yet. But today, I just want to be here to encourage you and inspire you to break off any shame around how you have parented in the topic of sexuality. Because here's the thing, what I think that shame does also is it gets us so stuck and stopped, where we just get stuck there, we get stopped, and we don't keep moving forward. But we have to repent, confess, and just honestly heal and break through those things that have brought shame on us, so that we can move forward, so that we can do better next time, so that we can have the next right conversation. And so it's so important to identify those moments of, oh yeah, I totally feel like I messed up, and now I'm like frozen in fear of, I don't want to mess up again, or I don't want to do this again. Also, each child is different. So if you are a mom or dad of multiple children, each personality is different, each child is different. So it's not like a formula of here's exactly how to do it and why to do it, because each child is ready at different times. I think I shared this last week if you were able to tune in. If not, it's up on our YouTube channel. But we have 3 boys. Let's see, 6, 8, and 10. My 6-year-old wants to know all the things about sex and sexuality. And then my 8 and 10-year-old are like, no, I don't want to know. I'm like, that's such a personality-based thing. Like, it has nothing to do with even age for them. My 6-year-old wants to ask all the questions. He actually thinks, like, he tells his older brothers, like, you need to know more about this. It's like super cute. But just knowing it's not even going to be a formula in your own family of how it's going to work out and how they want to talk about it and where and when. And then the other biggest excuse sounds really negative connotation, but another huge reason, and really the one that motivated me to talk about this today, is just shame that we have from our own past around sexuality, or shame from even our current situation. This kind of shame, I talked with a counselor who in his office over years of seeing people and couples and families, he said the number one reason that there's broken sexuality in homes and families is because the parents had their own shame that they hadn't dealt with. So a lot of us have unresolved things, fear, lies, shame from our past. It could be all the way back to when we were a child or something that happened to us. It could be our teenage years, years of promiscuity or sleeping around. And then it even can stem into just what your sex life is like now. If you're married and your sex life sucks and you're like, I don't even like thinking about this topic, let alone figuring out how to talk to my kids about it. Like, if we have an underlying deep-rooted negative connotation to sex of, it's dirty or guys always want it and girls don't, like whatever broken ideas we have around sexuality and the shame or the lies that like get compounded with that, then it's so much harder to overcome that and think, oh, I want to talk to my kids about this. We are so restricted in our own selves around the topic that we don't know how to bring it up in our families and with our children in a healthy way. So now I just listed off a whole bunch of reasons and excuses about why we don't talk about sexuality, but I want to give you, in the next just 10 minutes, we'll be done, and I want to give you 5 things that you can do. So I want you to feel activated, encouraged, empowered, and inspired to talk to your kids about sex, to have a healthy culture around sexuality in your homes, and how you can do that. And so number 1 of what you can do is to heal your past or your current situation. So just what I was talking about the shame that we might have, honestly, sometimes it's so deeply buried that we're not fully aware, that even just hearing this conversation today, you're like, oh yeah, that would probably be me. And again, if you're like me, when I feel stressed or something's going to be hard, I normally either like just retreat and draw back. I try to live in denial about it. My friends, if they were listening, they'd be like, no, you don't. You take it head on. But my initial reaction is like, oh, this is going to be so hard. I don't want to have to deal with another thing. But then honestly, the fight in me is, and I think one of the constant mantras in my life is, I will not settle for less than God's best. So that has applied mostly to my sex life with my husband. If you haven't heard our story already, we have it all over the internet on World Revolution, but my sex story was really challenging. As a teenager, I was very promiscuous. Before I knew the Lord, I had done hookups with, I can't even count all of the guys. So I had believed lust for so long that in my marriage, it was hard for me to believe love was real. So even though my husband, who had never been with anybody before, never told anybody else he loved them, like I could trust him through and through. He had never seen pornography, never masturbated. Like, he's a perfect specimen. I'm sure he would love that, of somebody I could trust. But because of the way that I had learned sex, subconsciously through what I watched, from what I listened to in my teenage experiences, sex inside of marriage was so hard for me. And so I had to do a lot of work, which looked like going to counseling. I found a Christian counselor that walked me through my past so that I could heal. Because I did have those really deeply embedded lies and beliefs about sexuality, to where I didn't view it the way that God designed it. And even though maybe I didn't hear. And so as parents, a lot of times we might know the right answer, but we're not going to feel drawn to and encouraged to and implored to talk around sexuality healthy with our kids if it's not here in a healthy way. And honestly, I can just say it's really hard work to do that. Counseling was very hard work. It wasn't easy. Showing up was hard some days when I knew just how painful and hard work it was, but it was so worth it. And so the first thing you can do is to heal your past. And like I mentioned before, it might not just be your past. It might be your current situation. Your sex life in your marriage right now might suck. You might be a single parent who is using either pornography or hookups or has another relationship that you know isn't right and isn't God's best for your life. And so you feel shame about the way that you're engaging in sexuality as a single person right now. Like, there's so many different stories and scenarios, and fully aware of that. But whatever your current situation is or your past is, please, 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 it's so important. Not only for how you talk to your kids about sex, but it's important to break those cultural lies off of your life, but to break off those generational curses in your family line, and to say, for me, that is what revved me up for the fight. Like, I'm like, oh, I will not let this pass on to my children. I will not let this be the end of my story. This will not be their mother's story, because I will find freedom. I will have a good sex life and sex as God intended to it. And I will be able to tell my children about how God can restore and redeem anybody and anything. And so I honestly, this is kind of cool because it's my first time just being screen to screen with you and knowing some of you might be feeling like, I feel like God is honestly just here right now. And I'm feeling what some of you are feeling of just, oh, this is too hard. This is too much. I'll never forget when a woman that I love and admire in my life, and she was in her 40s, and she said, I never told anybody what happened to me and what my brother did to me. Like, I promised I was going to take it to the grave. And it was something that she dealt with finally when she had teenagers and was in her 40s. And there's so many of you that I know have things like that sometimes what trauma does is it literally locks in the back of our minds, and we don't even deal with it. Like, our brain hides it in a way to protect ourselves. And so for some of you who are watching and you know that you have, I even talked to somebody recently who has dreams of past partners, and they're like, how do I get over this? Like, I don't even feel like I'm choosing this. I'm not choosing to participate in pornography, or I'm not choosing this. Like, I'm just having these dreams of past partners. How do I deal with it? It's so important to heal from our past brokenness, or if we're in a current state of sexual sin or sexual brokenness as parents, it's so important that we do the work to heal it. Now, that might sound funny right now as we're in social distancing and we can't go to a counselor, but I want to share with you, and after I'm done with the live, I'm going to go into our stories and share swipe ups of all of the resources I'm going to share. But the Transformation Center here, there's counseling everywhere that I'm sure lots of modes in different countries and different states. I'm sure you guys have counselors that are going online. But the one that I know of personally is the Transformation Center here at Bethel Redding, and they're turning all of the counseling to online sessions. So I'm going to share that resource later. It's called the Transformation Center. You can Google it. If you Google Transformation Center Redding, you can Google it. And some of the best counselors there that deal with trauma, that deal with sexual sin, they will help walk you into healing. A lot of times, and honestly, part of my story was I had confessed to pastors and leaders. I had done every prayer and prayed every prayer I knew how to pray, but I needed to be walked out of the trauma of my past, and I needed to heal with it. Somebody said, how do we deal or do the work on it? Honestly, this is actually what I was getting at, Amy, is I don't know what to tell you besides get professional help, because I had talked to pastors and leaders about it. My husband, who's amazing, I had talked with him. He had prayed for me. Like, we had done everything we knew to do, but I needed to go to somebody who was professionally skilled at walking me out of it, of walking me out of my sexual pain, of the lies that I had believed for so long. The Bible says in Romans 12 that we are renewed, or we're transformed by the renewing of our mind. And we've always probably heard that verse, or we've believed that verse. But what's crazy is that science is catching up with the Bible, and now that they can actually see in our brain, our mental pathways that are negative can literally be starved to death and disappear and be replaced with truth. Like, that is the transformation that we're talking about, is being renewed and being renewed in our mind and getting rid of mental pathways that are full of junk and pain and lies. I did go to a Christian counselor and a Christian sex therapist. Here's the thing. Thank you, Caitlin, for asking that question. I cannot encourage that enough, because as we study and as we research different sexuality topics, when I Google things or when I listen to other podcasts and I listen to other sex therapists who are not Christian, the things that they say are mind-blowing. I could go on that rant for another minute, but I highly encourage it to be Christian, because what is being taught outside of biblical worldview on sex is sometimes very scary to me. And sometimes I'm like, I don't understand how they have the mental understanding of how the brain works and then still promote these negative sin cycles, because they only lead to destruction, and it's proven by science, not just by the Bible. So yes, when it comes to sexuality, because listen, I know sometimes people might go to counseling about other topics and they might not have a Christian counselor, but yes, Christian sex therapists exist. A lot of Christian counselors are trained. Like the one I went to, the Christian counselor I personally went to, she wasn't even a sex therapist. Like she was a licensed marriage and family therapist, but sex wasn't her specialty. So honestly, a lot of just really good Christian counselors can work this out with you. But there are ones who specialize in sex or sexual trauma. And so I highly, highly encourage that. So it's so important to do this work. Somebody said something about going to counseling, but it's a guy. For me, I had to go to a female. I just knew I had to. I've done multiple rounds too. I want to share with you that I did counseling when I first started tackling the stuff from my past, after I realized I didn't realize until 5 years into our marriage that I had unresolved things from my teenage years. I did not connect the dots of that is why this is happening. That's why this is happening. That's why my husband would just come up behind me while I'm washing the dishes and my body would tense up because I would think, oh, he just wants sex. I'm like, what? Why am I thinking that way? So it took me a long time to realize that that's what I need help for. And then again, when I realized there was something in our sexual life that I wasn't comfortable with, I knew it was attached to my past, I went to counseling again. And I actually did Zoom counseling with somebody like far away at that time. So Zoom counseling can work. There are certain types of intense counseling that I did that wouldn't work very well over Zoom, but get started. Don't make excuses. Counseling is expensive. I know. We were on a youth pastor's one-person salary. We had 2 babies. We just made it work, because there's nothing more important than being healed so that you can be whole. And sometimes when you have trauma and when you have sex-related brokenness, it's really imperative to find a professional. Somebody mentioned that they have PTSD from happened. Oh, and I'm so sorry. And they said their pastor said it wasn't real. I'm so sorry. That's actually what I was diagnosed with on my first counseling session, was PTSD from my past. And I love debunking the lies of, like I could have gotten out of it. I didn't run. I didn't yell. I didn't stop. Like there's so many lies that keep us stuck and thinking my story is not that bad. And so how could it be this? So again, this is why I just implore going to a professional who can help you find wholeness, find healing, and find freedom. I'm going to move on to the next point because we could stay here all day. Oh, wait, let me read this one from Caitlin. Everything you said in your podcast about the tensing up or not having an orgasm, that's exactly what I'm living. You give me hope for the future. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Caitlin. Yes, I hope everybody that's listening, if you need the hope, receive the hope. It took work, but my husband and I went from not having sex, period, because I also had a physical issue that I needed surgery to fix, like an easy outpatient surgery. Then realizing I had mental and emotional issues. So we went from not having sex to having sex that was never pleasurable for me, really painful emotionally and physically at times, to we're on quarantine with y'all and we're having a lot of really good sex. We're like, this is the best. This is amazing. It took me 10 years to have an orgasm and to have breakthrough, but it's so worth it. The Kinsey Institute actually did research out of Indiana, and they said that in the research they did with married couples, that most married couples said they did not have good sex until year 12, and a lot of marriages end by year 7. So here's the thing about sex inside of our marriages. It might not be good, and part of the gift is discovery, but we've never been taught that. We think of it as performance. I have to perform well. It needs to end well. We need to know what we're doing. Like, we didn't know what we were doing for the first few years. Like, legitimately, on our wedding night, we called our pastors on speakerphone and said, help, we do not know what we're doing. So part of the gift and the joy is discovering together and not knowing what to do. I will say, yeah, it was part of the pain is overcoming my past. But now knowing the work I've done to get healing and get whole, like, my husband obviously just adores me for it. Like, we're both just so thankful for where we're at today. And it did take time. It took so much work. It's not just going to pass through time. It took work of showing up to counseling, of having communication. And yeah, our podcast is called Let's Talk About It, the Moral Revolution podcast. It's on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify. And then we also have a YouTube channel that we're now putting all of our podcasts on video form too. So you can go to our YouTube channel and find much more information. Okay, so that was only point one. I'm going to move on for point two, but I love the interaction that makes this way more fun than just talking to a screen. So feel free to keep sending stuff in and I'll read what I can. So the point two is, so point one was get healed from your past or your current situation of what you can do. Point two is get prepared and equipped. So I truly believe that this one is that the excuse and the reason that we don't talk about it is because we think, oh, I don't know what to say. I don't want to do it wrong. My parents never had a good conversation with me, so I've never seen this modeled before. And so we just get stuck in our tracks. So don't make those excuses, but go do some research, get prepared, get equipped. You are the expert for your child. You don't have to be an expert to the world, but your child needs to know my mom, my dad, like, they are confident when they tell me. If they sense that you're nervous or you don't know or you're angry or shocked by their questions, then they are going to feel that and they're not going to come to you. You know, like, that's when children go to Google or go to their friends because their parents shut down, get angry, get shocked, get uncomfortable. So you need to get prepared and equipped so that you can be comfortable enough to talk to your children about sex. So here are my recommendations for how, because you're probably thinking, okay, so how do I get prepared? How do I get equipped? There's so many good books, but again, like we talked about earlier with them needing to be biblically based, I totally believe in. So there's a great book called How and When to Talk to Your Kids About Sex. It's actually, if you are on Instagram, you can go to our highlight bubble that says parenting, and we just updated it. So go through that highlight bubble and you'll see all of our recommended resources. And you'll be able to swipe up and just even get the book if you want. It's not written by us, but it's a book we love and endorse. They are the same authors, doctor, counselor, who wrote the books for the children's series as well. So read a book, do some research, and then get resources. One other resource I want to share with you today that we've never shared before, we're going to connect with them and maybe even partner more together, but it's an amazing resource for parents. I feel like the best person ever when I get to tell parents about it because it's unreal, is axis.org, AXIS.org. They are parenting gurus. Like, they have so much information to make your job easy. They have parenting conversation booklets, and I think they're like $3.99. Like, it's a PDF download, but they do the research for you on topics. And I'm not just talking sexuality. It's what to think about Fortnite, what to think about Billie Eilish. I don't even know how to say her name. Like, just popular things that are going on in our kids' world. And then even things like modesty or cyberbullying, or it literally, they span every topic you can think of that you're like, I feel ill-equipped to talk to my kids about this. And so then we don't do it. They literally like hand it to you. Like, here's all the things you need to know about it. They do the research, and then they give you conversation kits and conversation starters of how to talk to your kids about it. Which I'm actually just going to jump ahead because one of my other point is that you have to ask questions to your kids. Okay. You have to ask them questions. It's not a monologue. It's not you sit them down and you tell them all the things. It has to be a dialogue. It has to be a conversation. So on axis.org, they will give you conversation kits and questions to ask your children so that you can have a dialogue about it. You can see what they're thinking and feeling about it, what they're believing about it. So it's so important to have conversations. Okay, the third point is, after you get prepared and equipped and you're feeling like, okay, I think I can do this. I've done my research. I've read the books. I feel ready to do this, is to actually start talking about it. So is just do it. Number 3 should be just do it. So start talking about it. Start younger than you think and more often than you think. It's not a talk for when children become a teenager. It's a talk that needs to happen often in the home around bodies and body parts and sexuality and just all of it. It needs to happen often. It's not just a one-time conversation. One more resource I want to share here that is amazing about how to talk to your kids. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to talk to your kids about porn, but I'm going to just touch it here just in case you missed next week. Fight the New Drug is one of our favorite other movements and organizations that are fighting the drug of porn and pornography. But they have an amazing resource, which is an interactive part of their website that I'll share the link to. But they basically say, do you want to talk to your kid about porn? Yes. And then you say, they are ready to talk about it. Like, I know that they've been exposed to it and seen it, or I just want to start the conversation. And like you click one or two, and then it sends you the direction that you need to go to talk to them about porn and sexuality. So Fight the New Drug is a great resource. We'll talk about porn prevention in our homes next week, more focused, but just want to touch on that there. And then talk about it often. So here's the deal. I understand that it will feel like an inconvenience to talk about it often, to go a little at a time, use everyday opportunities. We literally just 2 nights ago at the dinner table ended up having this lengthy conversation with our 2 older boys about sex, about pornography, and it just came up spontaneously. Nobody asked a direct question, and to be honest, I can't even remember what led the conversation that direction, but it was amazing. It felt really inconvenient at the time. I forget why. We had something that we were planning on doing. I think it was like a game night on Zoom with our friends. So I was thinking, this is like, we're not going to get done in time for bedtime. We're going to be running late, like silly little things. So it felt inconvenient time-wise. Even just part of me rose up and thought, like, this isn't the perfect setting and environment to have this. Like, the other kids are running around. It's messy. But it's like you have to just overcome all of those thoughts or just think, like, I'm not ready. Like, you might just be like, I don't feel like having this, like, in-depth, like, conversation that they'll probably remember for the rest of their lives. It feels high pressure. You have to take the pressure off and just do it. When it comes up, because there's an everyday little opportunity that started the conversation, then just go with it, run with it, lengthen your dinner time, cancel plans. When these conversations come up, you cannot avoid them. You cannot live in denial. Like, I mean, these are my 8 and 10-year-olds. So even like, I remember thinking at a second, like, Cole, like, are we really going to go all the way there? Because then he opened up like a new part of the conversation. I'm like, are we really going there tonight? So I remember feeling that, but just get over it, get over yourself and have the conversation, because your kids the world is going to be bombarding them with this stuff all the time. So there's no reason that in the home it shouldn't be talked about when there's opportunities and when it comes up. And so, the last point we kind of already just jumped ahead and hit was to ask questions, have a dialogue. It's not a monologue with your kids. So I hope that today just encouraged you a bit, inspired you to live without shame. If you do realize after this conversation today, man, I've definitely got some unresolved issues towards sexuality, or even just my past, or things that have happened, or things that I'm currently doing or seeing or looking at, please, 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 please just do the work, give it to God, but then get help, whether that means talking to your spouse about it, talking to a professional about it. Start today, start somewhere. Don't wait for the perfect time or the perfect moment, and then just get prepared. You are the experts for your children. You are the best people to talk to your kids about their bodies, about sexuality, and just let's live healed and whole so that we can pass on the greatest, not the greatest gift, Jesus is the greatest gift, but a great gift of sexuality and healing and wholeness to our children, and have healthy cultures in our homes around the topics of sexuality. So thank you for tuning in.